but maintain the stairs that access the roof rather than using a ladder from the exterior as a safety measure for the facilities individuals that may have to enter the roof during the winter or summer.
So then that was your comment, and then we'll leave that, we'll leave the minutes as they are. I have no other comments on the minutes. All in favor of approving the minutes as the August 8th minutes as is? Aye.
I'm going to abstain. I apologize. I didn't get a chance to read them, so I will abstain. I'm assuming they're.
Okay. So that passes semi-unanimously with one abstention. Chair's comments. As I found out just a few minutes ago, that Bill McMinn has not retired. He's usually been my go-to guy for answering questions like covering the academy windows and protecting them against foul balls in the ball field. So I did not follow up on that from last week, from the last meeting on the 8th, but it will be for me to follow up on. And Bill might be the one who has a solution, or Austin, you may be involved too.
It would be Bill, but I can assist him in doing that.
Okay.
At the last meeting, Dave Sperling said that he may have some netting to be able to give from the Little League to be able to put up. So that may be the first calls.
So if you want your, since we're your last on the 8th rather than the last meeting, it appears as though there's additional damage, additional breakage since the spring. So we'd like to cover it up now with, I guess, fall balls coming up. So that can cover it.
Yeah, it's not damage from Little League. I can assure you.
I would pretty much expect that. We should for this, at this point, I'd like to get it covered. Again, because just as a follow-up to that, those windows are going to be saved. They're going to be reglazed, but the frames are going to stay. So it would be important for us to protect them. Also, I noted from last week that Joan and Ann, you were going to talk to facilities, some of the facilities on paving the parking lot. Paving,
Paving the parking lot.
that was in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
No,
No, we're gonna look at,
the CIP.
and see what the schedule was and if it would dovetail with the project.
So yeah, I did not actually look at CIP last week. The last couple of weeks, a little crazy.
So we'll postpone that, any report on that till next time, along with the baseball, the windows in the ball field. The discussion of the Iverton Playhouse, I do have a date for that. And the other follow-up we're going to be talk about, and I'd like to talk about near the end, it is 13th on the list. And that's the construction manager versus general contractor. We've had a lot of discussion. If there's a broad consensus tonight, I'd like to vote on it at that point, and we'll get to number 13. And we'd like to, and that way we can get moving on, following up in whatever direction we have to. Okay. Right. That concludes the chair comments. Any questions? Anything else?
One follow-up note regarding options for paving. We're hoping to have that conversation, I think, at the same time that we're planning to meet with the finance department to discuss grant options, which that's not been scheduled. Funding options, not grants. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So we did get some questions back from bond attorney, so we're going to see if we can have a meeting with bond attorney and director of finance and get this done correctly. Most likely it will be
political action committee, so it's a nonprofit PAC or nonprofit be created in order to do this, and then that would be donated, and at the same time the donation comes in, it would be a special appropriation out. So there would still have to be a town meeting, but it would be a wash, so thought process, but we want to get all the details and really know what we're going to do before we ask the public to do something.
So it's a town meeting to create it, but not every time.
No, it's not, there's no town meeting to create anything. The private citizen needs to create it.
Okay.
It would be when the donation actually happens to the town, it would have to be a town meeting to accept the donation and then take that money and put it directly into this project. So that would still require a town meeting. For bond council. So we just want to verify all those facts before we move forward.
That closes out item 4 on the agenda. Liaison reports, Austin, Scott, Al's the official liaison.
Can't think of anything at the moment.
Any comments? Okay,
Well, no, I just want to
okay.
just comment that when Austin and I did talk about, we didn't make the last meeting, but we're aware of the value engineering list and, you know, that our departmental space was noted on that list. So I think just want to remind the committee, that was a part, our space in that building was a part of the initial referendum. It's important to keep it in there. And we understand the process. There's a lot that we'll all there's a lot of work to be done. Appreciate Tom and the work that he's doing to bring all of the options to the group. So just wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Ditto.
Invoice packet, is that applicable?
Also today,
Line item transfers also.
nothing today.
Collier's update. John, well, I'd like to, anyone who hasn't met Mark, I don't know, John, elaborate if you have, Mark Skolenka, one of our original project managers, going back several years. We're going to be making, we have some discussions tonight that may require his expertise. So I invited him to come, and there he is. Good to see you, Mark.
Came here for the beach pass.
And then you found out you could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Austin, I think you can take that sign down. So the beach pass is being.
We're still selling.
Are you still selling?
Oh, yeah.
Joe, Darren Mannix is trying to log on, but having difficulty.
Okay. There is an item on the agenda for
Yes.
somewhere.
Number 10.
Yeah, I think it's number 10. But first, John or Mark, did you have anything to add?
We don't have anything further, anything of significance and further time to the business items coming up.
The QA&M update. On our desks is a version of a drawing, a change in the design of the building, and Tom was going to report on it tonight, not only on the design change, but the have it, Tom, that there are any significant cost differences between the current and the old former design.
PowerPoint, where possible. Rather have it with.
I'm an old dog learning a new trick. Thank you. Okay. So. Let's plug in.
Looks like Aaron, see?
Do you have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
And you want to-
Yeah, you're gonna jinx it now.
Okay, thank you. I can read it.
Yeah, just a little, just a couple more.
So.
We can see it.
Wait,
Oh, that.
stay like that.
I don't have, I didn't bring this, John. I printed
You're on Zoom.
Did you print?
John.
Yes, I printed.
Do you have it digitally so they can send it?
Oh, wow.
Well, tell them I'm
We have it
gonna
on.
be presenting concept. I'll
Do I get-
present those documents.
That'll be.
No, I think it's okay. This contains all of the information. that's in that document, basically. So, over the last week and a half, our team has taken it upon us to explore an alternative option for how to construct the lobby in an effort to save a chunk of dollars because we've exhausted our ideas from a value engineering standpoint. And next slide. Right, can you hit the right arrow on the keyboard? Oh, it didn't go? Oh, no. There it is. Oh, look at that. Next one. Okay, so what we're proposing is to, instead of demolish, instead of gutting the total classroom bay, to reuse the existing classroom bay, put a stair and a ramp on the exterior of the building that gets you to the main level, and then put an elevator in the lobby. Great. Maybe one more. Perfect. This is a basement level. So this is the main level plan. And the plan would propose not renovating not enclosing the courtyard. And we would build the elevator as a new elevator in the courtyard, but outside the building. We would leave the classroom construction entirely as it exists. So the structure would stay, the 2-floor classrooms would stay, and we would create openings to get into that lobby space and create a vestibule on the exterior of the building. We would build a whole new stair, concrete stair and ramp, so that patrons approaching the building could come into this first level, which we would turn into the cafe space. So instead of having the cafe here, we would put it in the existing building. And then the canopy would remain outside the building. The rest of the plan would remain entirely as it is. This allows us not to have to demo all of this building. It allows us not to build the new steel framing and construction. And it accomplishes some of the similar things. Next slide, please. Thank you. On the second floor, this was originally taken out as, it allowed to be 2-story space. This would now just be renovated as another multi-function community space. And you can see we've shaded it in green. And, this too can be selected for value engineering, whether it's fit out or whether it's just left raw. Next slide. Thank you. And you can see at the roof level, the courtyard would no longer be infilled, and these areas would just become re-roofed as existing re-roof. Also, I'll point out that in our current scheme, we've we've considered removal of the penthouse for a couple reasons. One, there is the potential for a very small amount of savings if we remove it. I think we allocated $50,000. But two, if we have to sprinkler the building, this is considered a fourth story by current code. Because we're renovating enough of the building, we'd be required to bring it up to code, and we'd be required to put a fire pump in the building. If we have to put a fire pump in the building and an emergency generator in the building, those would represent significant cost increases to the project. Probably somewhere to the tune of $250,000. So even though there could be potential costs to remove that, we're avoiding significant cost increases by removing it.
Thomas, just a sprinkler component, or it wouldn't be accessible or occupiable, where you'd have to get stairs and elevators and other pieces to that space?
Well, the penthouse wouldn't be accessible, but it could be used because there's equivalent spaces elsewhere in the building.
Would you have to make it accessible?
We would not have to make this space physically accessible because it's an existing space. In our cost evaluation, it costs about the same to just clean it up and put a new roof and windows on it than it does to actually tear it out, infill the roof framing and put a roof on it. So I think there's a little bit of savings, but
Would you still maintain access to the roof through that?
yeah, we could use the existing stairwell to get access to the roof in that area and just put a roof hatch over it.
So you said if we need to sprinkler, so that when will we know?
As of right now, we're presuming that we're sprinklering the building. I'm still waiting on the water pressure test. And we still have to have a conversation with the fire marshal. So we're presuming as if we have to do it. I contend the code gives us that flexibility, but I haven't discussed this matter with the fire marshal or the building official yet. So
Now, the budget that we saw last time included it.
that's correct. Yeah. Oh, next slide.
Tom,
Thank you.
is closing off the penthouse an option? Just sealing it off? Is that a viable option?
Well, I think cleaning it up and renovating it or removing it are the two options.
What do
Because
you mean by removing it?
removing it, just taking it off the building, that's what we're kind of proposing.
The whole thing?
Yeah, and just, provide a roof area. I think there's a number of benefits to it. I mean, it's a nice space, but it needs a lot of work. It's not accessible. And again, if we're forced to provide a fire pump for the building, an emergency generator from a mandatory perspective, I think we're gonna incur a significant amount of cost and scope to the project.
And is that because it's a fourth floor, Tom?
That's correct.
Okay, so 3 floors, you don't need, if there's a fourth floor, then those codes kick in.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, here are the original concept designs for the front entrance. Here, this was done during the study phase. You can see we have this curtain wall, and you can visibly look into the lobby. And this is where we were tearing that whole section of the building out with a straight canopy. This is a more recent design where, again, we have the curtain wall. It's all glass. This is a new 2-story lobby. This would be the revised concept where what we plan to do is to cover the existing facade with storefront glass, which is less expensive than curtain wall glass. And we would line up the storefront to align with the existing window openings. So right now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 window openings at each floor. So from the outside, it would still maintain the appearance of all glass during the day. At night, it would look like there was, punched openings because the light would come through those punched openings. But in the daytime, it would still have a similar appearance and it would seal that side of the building. And then you can see we have a proposed stair and ramp, and we've extended the canopy to cover the ramp area and a new vestibule. So it has a similar appearance to our original scheme. And we would save some money in going from storefront to curtain wall. But most of the savings are in leaving the existing structure. Next slide. And then from a 3D perspective, this is how it would look. Access to the building would remain the same. It's about seven or 8 steps up to that first floor, depending on what the final exterior grade is. Maybe that can come up a little bit. And we lose a step, and then there would be ramp to the outside. You can see this is what it looks like with the penthouse removed. And you can see that the elevator is kind of peaking above the roof there.
Hey,
Next slide.
Tom,
Yep.
quick question. The elevator space going into that center courtyard area, does that eliminate the need to excavate when you have the steps up to that first floor?
It eliminates the need to do all of the excavation except for the hallway that we're gonna break through. Right now, there's an existing crawl space under that entrance classroom. And we're gonna have to underpin the foundations so that we can create that hallway that connects both sides of the basement. I really think that's essential. There's some cost to do that, but yes, we've eliminated all of that excavation work.
Great, thank you.
And then maybe there's one more slide. And then this is what the exterior of the building would look like head on. So I did hear back from the cost estimator today, much to my dismay. He projected the savings at no more than $350,000. And I was taken aback by that a little bit. I thought we would discover maybe $500,000 at best. But when you really start looking at it, we had a really good discussion. So we removed the structure and all the structural steel. We're going to remove a chunk of demolition work, which is good. But we really can't remove the elevator. We're just essentially moving it. And we're removing the infill of the floor and the courtyard. We're removing the fit out of that space. But we're adding back in the stairs, the concrete stairs at the exterior, which are pretty significant, the stairs and ramp. We're adding in a bigger exterior canopy. We still have some exterior glazing treatment at the outside of the building. And now we have to fit out the front classroom and the classroom above it. So we're adding back in fit out costs of those spaces. The cost of the roof is saved, and we've already taken the savings to remove the clerestory light in another line item. So we can't double dip those savings. So the one thing that I argued with the estimator about is that we're not factoring in any savings associated with simplifying the construction. Meaning it's it's more complicated to demo the building and build new in that little area than to just renovate the interior of the building. And the estimator at this point just doesn't have enough information to make, make a bigger bite out of the number. So I've benchmarked it at $350,000. I will reflect that in the value engineering savings. I think it's enough money to really think about. Programmatically, I think it still accomplishes the same things. Architecturally and functionally, it works. I don't think it's as nice as the original scheme, but I do think that it erases a fair share of unforeseen risks. What I mean by that is when we leave the existing building and structure intact, we're not opening ourselves up to potential unforeseens that may be hiding when we demo all of that building, or potential future change orders. So while you can't quantify that today, I think that has potential real future risk or cost. So I think it's definitely worth considering. I had got to the point where I just didn't know, I don't know how we can find any more value in the project. One of the things the estimator pointed out to us is while we're cutting a lot of construction, we're not cutting any of the MEP. We still have to provide heating and cooling and air to now 2 spaces. So from an MEP perspective, it's a very similar swap 1-to-1. And where I can't get the MEP engineer to back off their perspective that all of the building infrastructure needs to be replaced, it's really hard to get any more cost out of it. So I tried to look at it from a different perspective, from just the straight square foot approach perspective. We're talking about, let's say, 3,000 square feet of affected area, maybe 4, somewhere between 3 and 4. And if the total construction cost is budgeted about $450 a square foot, and all the MEP is stripped down to about $150 a square foot, the most that we have to really work with is about $300 a square foot in that area. If it's about 3,000 square feet, we're looking at maybe $900,000 of value, maximum value in that area. So if we figure we've taken out maybe a third or maybe half of that, we've taken out, let's say, $450 of that construction, but then I've had to add back in $150 to build the new concrete stairs, to expand the canopy. And then now we have to add windows at the courtyard walls. We have to masonry restore those. It starts to kind of make sense. So as of today, I'm on board with the $350,000 number, much to my chagrin, but I think we've saved $350,000 if we take that direction. And I think we've potentially avoided a number of future unforeseen risks.
So Tom, just have a question about so we are losing MEP treated square footage.
That's correct.
In the courtyard.
But we're gaining it on the second floor of that space.
Yeah, but no, that was always going to be commissioned space because you had the second story of the.
But it's not floor area from the square foot standpoint. It's just fully volumetric space. So yes, I would argue with you from a pure square footage standpoint, maybe we could save that MEP impact, but maybe it's maybe it's 1,200 square feet at, maybe it's 1,200 square feet at $150 square foot. Or $100 a square.
Right, and I think there is some savings by not finishing that space out. This was always a finished two-story space, just the floor, still. heating, cooling.
Additional lighting and, you know, additional power distribution. Listen, you're preaching to the choir. On this. So maybe, again, maybe there's a little bit of room to expand that number. Maybe we're missing something that we're adding. I think it's a good ballpark to be.
I guess what, if I had a comment, it's, we don't need any more square feet. We've got 50,000 square feet in the building. If there's a way that that space could be just, again, volumetric, that wouldn't hurt us.
But like classroom on the second floor.
Yeah,
I don't know how.
I don't know how you do it, but
If I take the floor, let's say I just demoed the floor and just let it all be one volumetric space, then I create other problems. Now I have to brace the exterior
Yeah,
walls.
But the point was, we don't, if there's a spot where we can save dollars by decreasing the square feet, we don't need that. That large amount of square feet.
At this point, the only significant thing left in the project is that mechanical, electrical, and plumbing upgrades. And if there's a way we could do less of it, or take a completely different approach to the building, then that's the only way, that's the only place that we can take a real bite out of this project.
Could you explain one thing for me before, and that's if you go back to the main level, you could either bring it up here or.
Oh, yeah. You got this.
Yeah.
Do you have a, like, if we put that in, what it gets us to?
I did not bring the updated spreadsheet. I'm sorry, I got that information mid-afternoon and I
No
just
worries.
didn't get to it.
It would be somewhere around 100. 1.8, 1.9. Over.
If we took
over
everything else.
If we took everything else. It would bring about, would bring about. to about 1.9.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, great.
It's a lot.
See?
Including that.
Including. Yeah.
So this is the main level.
What does that space look like? What had been the interior of the building, that's unfinished?
Oh, the courtyard?
Yeah, what does that look like in this?
Ooh, I have a few renderings, I think, at the end of the slide. Should
On the inside, it was like,
I don't know, what does it
keep going.
what does it look
what it looks like today.
like? There's an
No,
elevator.
Oh, it's an elevator.
Okay, so this is what the front lobby might look like. So we would turn that front classroom into the cafe, some soft seating, and you would walk through that space when you came and went. Next slide. So our thought was we would turn that courtyard space, try and turn it into just a rock garden, something that has low maintenance. It could be an oriental, grasses or something landscaped in a very simple way, so you could use it, maybe get access to it through a interior stair or we'd try and create a door so that at least you can get in there and maintain it. It's not an awesome space, but one of my thoughts was maybe that's an opportunity for artwork. So all of those spaces look down into that courtyard. Is there?
We have the Madison Mile, right?
Yes.
So which one?
Tom?
Put one on top.
Next slide.
Is it covered space?
Maybe the next one.
Yeah.
It would not be covered.
So we open it to the sky. So whatever it was after we water.
Whatever Oh,
Drainage.
yeah, no, there, currently it's outdoor space.
Right.
It has a lawn and it has a yard drain and
The color of
so.
the lawn is.
Well, understood, but I'm thinking it would have to be made, it would have to be made some sort of, courtyard. And, again, that's where some of the cost offset is, because we have to now do something there.
There's an assumption that drainage.
We don't, we could just leave it unfinished, you're correct, that's fair. So,
There's drainage.
and maybe go back to the title, the very first page.
Years.
With this,
Yeah,
the sewers, the septic.
Thank you
leach
for helping.
field is underneath there. And that's going to be dug up. Some version of that's going to be changed.
Decommission.
Can we just look at the lowest level slide and just, because we quickly went by it, but.
Oh, the basement
Yeah.
side. So this is what I was kind of talking about. So currently, this entire rectangle is crawl space. There's no way to get, there's a way to get into it. It's a really high access hatch. But there's no way to get from this side of the basement to that side of the basement. You have to go up the stairs, walk over, go down the stairs. We would propose underpinning the foundation on this exterior wall of the courtyard and here so that we could make that corridor go through, and then the elevator would connect that corridor. So that would give you elevator access to both sides of the building. Again, it's a function, it's a good solution, it's functional. I think it should be considered by the committee. As we mentioned at the prior value engineering meetings, we are over our budget, but we're at a very early stage. This is very schematic in nature. I don't have a construction manager on board to help us through the estimating process or another independent estimator to do that. The drawings are schematic in nature. The MEP documentation is narrative in nature. To really fine tune the costs, I believe we need to go through the design development phase. However, I did indicate that I felt that we really needed to close the gap. I think we had a gap of about 2.5, and I really felt we needed to find about $1.5 million so that our delta was really only about 10% before moving to the DD phase. So I still contend we need to be in that range before we go to the DD phase. I think we really need to continue looking for cost savings measures, and I think this is one that should at least be considered.
If we turn space into storage, do we have to keep that space?
You have to temper it, yeah. So to protect the building, you need to keep it 50 degrees, 55 degrees in the wintertime, and in summertime, keep it, under 85 or something like that. So it has to be tempered.
I'm just wondering if there's some, like, if we start to eliminate, we cut scope in that lower level. Is there an ability for us to say, to your point, we don't need square footage necessarily? We take some of those areas that are probably partially underground, probably will maintain pretty well already, cut some of the MEP cost out of our budget. If we say that's not livable space or usable space.
So that's good information. Yes, I think we could do that. We could really pare back MEP scope in some areas. But I think in order to get a value of that, we would really have to get into the weeds and have the MEP engineer, lay out a design for those areas that has the scope and really pared down. If it's storage room, it just has utility lighting and it just has, you know, maybe service outlets. And that's it, you know, and just have supplemental air to temper the space. We could potentially do that.
That space was always humid. It had a moisture problem, this school. If we tempered the MEP, would that also cut back on the HVAC? I think you'll need to do something in that space that will keep the humidity down, because it was an awful place in the summer.
Yeah, yes, I think you'd have to do something to keep the humidity down, so you have some sort of, you know, dehumidification. You know, maybe you don't have to provide air conditioning at that level, just, well, dehumidification is air conditioning, but, you know, maybe there's a different approach. You know, if the lower level is gonna be developed for, let's call it, you know, future development, you put the infrastructure in place, the mechanical units can be sized, but you don't necessarily have to run on ductwork distribution. The electrical service can be sized, but you don't have to run, you know, all of the power. You just have storage, utility lighting, and utility power. You know, if we're not occupying that lower level of the building, potentially that reduces the amount of plumbing fixtures we need in the building. We could just put the infrastructure in, so in the future, you could, you know, develop bathrooms at that level.
Like my head is that, like, are there possibilities like that where we can phase this? Because if we make a change like you're proposing to the main structure, you're not changing that. If we decide not to move forward with the original proposal, move forward with this, the building is the way it is now. If we do something like we say, we're not going to develop this space right now, we're going to do something lower key, we can potentially,
I think that's gonna be hard sell to the public. I think
what's going to be hard
to not develop the whole first level, that's gonna be very hard sell.
in what way?
Well, the reason that
The fact that-
if you look at the whole building, a significant amount of space is Madison town offices. So if you've taken a hunk of the third floor, and now you're not going to develop the lower floor. You know, what are you developing? You've got basically one floor left or 1.5 left. And I admit that's a hard sell.
Yeah, we have been given a mandate to develop programmatic space.
Right. And so this is part of the programmatic space.
We've been given a hard budget too, like.
Right. But I mean, if we
So.
take the, and I just did a quick hard numbers here. If we take out in the 350, we remove from the list of things that are gonna be value engineered, you take out the beach and rec and you take out youth and family services, because they are gonna be going in there. And you take everything else that you put in, you're at 1.57 million. So you're at that 1.5 million base. We're removing the geothermal. I think, you know, that's something that if somebody decided that they wanted to push for that or donate for that or do something, we could potentially put it back in, but I think that's a very large cost.
I don't think in the geothermal, we have an idea what the rebate structure is. What is the supplemental part that might come from Eversource or something like that, or the state. Is that correct, Tom?
But the rebate is once again a lower of the cost. It's considered a grant. It's not gonna be savings per se.
I don't know what the savings are on the geothermal, but Eversource's energy conservation subsidies max out at $3 a square foot. So the magnitude of costs you're talking in terms of, you know, sort of utility subsidies is $150,000 for the building to perform at that level. Without me understanding if there's additional subsidy for the geothermal plant. But, I mean, that's real money, but that's if your building performs at the highest level. this is an existing building, we're only gonna be able to make it perform at, you know, such a level, so the utility incentive is probably gonna be less than that threshold, not taking into account geothermal. It's not,
I have a couple of my questions.
Okay.
Do your numbers include the septic system?
I did the the subtotal 1511 322 from last time. I took out Rec, I removed the youth income, and also removed youth income services off the table because those are going to stay, and then I added the 350K back in. That's how I
but you
got.
did not include adding in any of the add alternates,
Nope.
which is the,
Which is the septic system.
which has to be done.
So the second question, all of these dollars are $2023.
That's correct.
Our budget is our budget is $2021.
Yes, but our actual is going to be 2024 and 2025.
Well, I was
The budget does have escalation included. in
There's a certain
several
amount of
lines.
escalation.
But does the estimate include escalation?
Just to,
The estimate itself does not include escalation, but it does include design estimating. It's just our cost of today's dollars, and the owner's budget has includes escalation. You,
just a quick input if I may.
Go ahead.
I can only hear about 3/4 of what's being said, so if it's not the appropriate time, let me know. But we've got a 54,000 square foot building, but we have to keep in mind that only 25,000 of it is programmable space. And do we know what percentage of that programmable space is in that bottom floor? It's a good chunk of the top floor that's already allocated to other purposes where it's not programmable space. So we need to be careful not to cut ourselves back to a point where we don't have sufficient space for generating income for operating expenses and satisfying the needs of the community. I know it sounds like a lot of space, but when you look at the programmable space, which is what the community center is all about, it's more limited. So it might be interesting to take a look at what percent is in that lower space of the overall programmable.
Do we have a sense of the bottom, this all feels very ambiguous too. We don't know how much programmable space we need as a town, do we? We know?
Actually, the survey in there was, I think that the other, the ad hoc committee did a survey and it really did tighten up as to what the needs were. And I think they actually tagged different spaces for
I saw
different
that.
uses. So I think we may want to do another meeting that has an update on the BE options. I think, and so it's apples to apples, because last time this was kind of apples to oranges. We were pulling stuff in from one side and not having an estimate for it, or vice versa. So I think we need to really have that, whatever was the original estimate, and then next to it, this is what the new one is. And then, I'm just saying, and then the other things to potentially look at is, I know that we have a decent amount for furnishings, and we may be able to phase that piece in, maybe, you know, Youth and Family Services and Reach and Rec bring their stuff here, and then the additional pieces are fairly low key, or not at the highest end, and we can kind of figure some things out there. But I think from my perspective, at least, the mechanicals have got to be done, and it's got to be done correctly and tight, and so that going forward, you can get the nice to haves in there, if it's not developed out. So
Well, there are ways to branch the mechanicals as well, where they can cap things and they can put, to Tom's point, they can put the main services in.
Right.
And then those branches are brought online later.
but I still think, I don't think we can say that the lower floor is not going to be used. I think that.
Well,
would be-
To an extent,
100% is a drastic measure, right? But maybe there's 50% of the floor that's not used, or 30% of the floor that's not used.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there where we cut some dramatic scope and say, the entire space under the gym, the entire space over here is not gonna become storage. For now.
I'd also point out, I understand this is a hard conversation and a hard discussion, and we'll keep working at it, but the reality is we have X amount of dollars, and if anything that we can do or anything that we can value engineer that can be done at a future date in a simpler way, it has to be considered as the BE option. If you can fit a portion of the building out at a later date, then, that's something that's got to be considered as a realistic BE option. The infrastructure, listen, more than anybody else in this room, I hate spending money on stuff that goes in the ground or you're not gonna see, right? Or you're not gonna touch, that stinks. But if you don't have a roof and windows and mechanical system, you're gonna lose your asset. You have to protect the asset. And it just hasn't been protected over the years. So unfortunately, that
Just to make-
priorities.
Just to make sure that I'm clear on the point I was trying to make, I'm not suggesting, we're limited by the budget. I completely understand that. We're going to have to make some hard decisions about probably limiting some of the programming space that's available. But we need to try to minimize that as much as possible. And as much as possible means when you're out of money, you close the wallet. And based on that, I think it makes sense to get back together with the advisory committee at that point and assess, are we able to cover the primary concerns and needs of the community in the space that remains? So I think it needs to be a cooperative effort between the two committees, that we're faced with limitations and cutting to match the budget. Now, how can we make best use of what's left?
John, I would just add to that, what Joan said earlier. I think having that meeting is important, but going into that meeting with what does core and shell and base building cost? What does beach and rec and youth and family services cost? That's all put to the side. So those are must-haves, have to do. And then, as Joan said, what's then the cost roughly per programmable space, so we can intelligently say the kitchen cost is roughly X. These common rooms cost X per square foot. So then we can have an intelligent conversation around, if we talk cutting programming, what does that actually look like from a budgetary standpoint to get us to one number? And then on the other small bucket, the architectural changes, roughly what does, that save us? To go into that meeting with the advisory committee, so it's transparent when we talk about making changes, roughly in a ballpark, what is that going to get us?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
John, one of the things I didn't see in the advisory committee report is hours or percentage usage of any of the spaces. Each of the spaces had a use, but if the usage is 90% of available hours, that's one thing. If it's 30% of available hours, that's something else. Was that information in and I just missed it, or is it available? Because to say we've allocated a room for this and a room for that, if each of them is at 50% usage, then you could cut one of those out.
Yeah, I completely agree. It wasn't done as a percentage of usage, but it was assessed of dedicated space that would not be used 100% of the time versus flexible space that could be used 100% of the time. So that's in the survey results. And then I think the assumption was it's up to programming effort then to get full utilization out of that room during open hours.
I think as we've seen with the senior center, you build it, they will come. That's fairly tact programming wise.
Right, and like John is saying, the majority of the space is flexible space. So that enables you to program it from, 8 to 10, 8 AM to 10 PM.
Mhm.
And the dedicated space would be used, for that particular activity. Could be from 8 AM to 10 PM. But until we know what we're getting, it's hard to say.
I think a good example is we talked about a kiln room where you would, for ceramic pottery, you'd have a room that had the kiln in it for baking the pottery. Well, obviously, that's going to be a limited use room. So that would not be used 100% of the time, but it's relatively high in the list of community wants. So we would just need to sort through those things and figure out, based on that, what makes the most sense.
I have a process question for 1, 2, 3, Tom, John, and Mark. We are going to be charged with making some pretty decisions that have a dramatic effect on, marked effect on the usage and the space available in this facility. We're making it with estimates that are square foot based on square footage, which is not the, it's a good estimate, but not a great estimate. How far and how do we go forward? Do we make those decisions now and with the costs that we have? Or can we define the estimates more closely so that we can make more informed decisions?
Because this is mostly a renovation project, there are some things you want to decide now, because you don't want to let the design team continue to design and, oh, sorry, go back, right? Like if this was a new building, you don't want to say, oh, continue designing an $55 building, and never mind, I'm going to cut it back to $40,000. Those you can't do after schematic design. But this is a renovation. 95% of this building is a renovation. It needs an elevator and it needs a maybe entry. Those aren't going. What we're talking about is what are we finishing out for interior space? Those decisions can be made down the road. One of the things that I don't know if we talked about alternates, right? You can create some bidding alternates. Like that courtyard, finishing out that courtyard. To me, that would be a bidding alternate, right? The bids can be favorable. If you want to add finishing out a courtyard to hang out in, maybe that's a bidding alternate. It's less complicated to design that and not do it. I don't want to speak for Tom because it's his team that's doing, the lion's share of this effort. But I don't think there's a lot within this building that I would say, you got to make a decision today. Geothermal, yes. Can't design two systems. If you're making a decision on the new entry, yes, make that decision now. You don't want to go back to the original concept. Everything else on the inside, continue to address as we're getting more detailed estimates.
I guess my one comment is normally how this process works is design, we get the estimate reconciled, and then we move on to the next phase. Based on the estimates we had, we were 2.6 over our call it $10 million. I recommended we find as much value engineering as we can to get closer to 10% over, because I feel that a 10% gap is manageable. Probably find that, whether it's in scope or changes. Additionally, because we've only done schematic drawings at this point, as we refine the design, we can, be more specific about what we're providing. And then the next phase of estimating, which is the more detailed phase, we will have 2 estimators, or we will have an estimator and construction manager working with us to help us fine tune the scope. And I think we'll have more resources at our disposal to make sure that the costs we have are really on point. And so I'm encouraging moving to the design development phase but not until you cut all the low hanging fruit and get us closer to where we're gonna go. And if there are things, so savings like fitting out youth payment services or fitting out beach and rec, those really kind of don't matter because we can draw those and we can call it ad alternate, the way Mark calls it. And if you choose a later date to put it in or out of the scope, you can do that. But anything that we know for a fact that we can remove from the scope to get us closer to the budget.
I also think that you've got large volumes of space. You got the gym, the existing gym, there's a big volume of space that I know you want to use. You know, there's a fair amount of cost going into that, could be an ad alternate. You know, keeping the rest of the offices, other spaces as, we need that, right? For the gym, we'll fix up the gym, we'll clean up obviously, fix the windows. But is it a new floor, is it a new stage? Who knows? Maybe we don't defer that. Make the same argument for the lowest level. There's no actual immediate programmable space. That also could be, it as an alternate, the entire lower level. So I think there are chunks of volume of space that you could design, right? And say this entire space is an alternate. So we get a bid that says, okay, we can afford them, we can ask them back in. Just a strategy that you can consider.
Right.
What's maybe Joe, this is a question for Joe. Yeah, I'll give you the floor. What's the political ramifications? What happens to say, well, you're just gonna need more money later?
Well, I think that if we know what the dollar value is, then there could potentially be fundraising to create a stage and soundproofing and to fix it. That's what we're gonna have a meeting with the bond council. Because this was concept out there. And so it really ties back to what was in the original listing of scope and what went into that. Because the public didn't see the details behind it, they just had general numbers. I think it's still a little fuzzy, and that's why I want to say we want to go apples and apples and see where we do things. I think politically, I think we got to get as much done as possible, and I think we, along the way, need to keep the public informed. So once this thing is happening and we say, okay, we've taken this off and we have a public hearing and we say, this is what we're doing, guys, before we go out to bid, this is what we're going to be bidding on. And we give the public the information and we get feedback. And if there's strong feedback to try to get more money in on top of this, then we can potentially go to a town meeting and get more money. But I think we need to keep the public informed each time that there's big changes. And I think if you do that and you call town meetings, you say it's an information session, it's not a town meeting, but come out, you know, put it on signs and say, you know, come talk about Academy School, and we do a presentation. By that time, you know, either at high school or at Polson to show what's happening, then I think it's easier to defer that kind of thing. I don't think you're gonna get buy-in to defer beach and rec and youth and family service. I think you really got to take that off the table, period, end of sentence. I said you potentially can defer, you know, a new floor. If the floor looks pretty good and it can be sanded, I don't know what shape it's in, I have no clue, or something can be laid over it. Because that's a very large gym, you know, maybe you don't put the basketball courts up and you say, we're gonna have pickleball for now. And that's it, we're not gonna do anything else, we'll do some pickleball. So you don't have some of that larger equipment potential. Some thoughts. You know, the full millwork for the cafe. I think that could potentially be off and we find something else that might, or high end that may work, or we ask for some donations of material or donation of different people. I mean, we have a really generous construction based town. You know, half of Strong Fields was, you know, the field house was donated by contractors that wanted to get this thing done. So I think we have some opportunity. We may have opportunity on the outdoor space. You know what I mean? Maybe we don't do anything with the outdoor space, except that the entranceway, and we leave that as a next phase. That's a potential, if there's a good savings there. I think people say, I'd rather have the money go into the building. We can always landscape later and do things later with the town under CIP. So I think we've got to have some options to present, but in order to do that, I think we've got to kind of go through and say, okay, here's what the original ask was, here's what we're saying now, and here's the things that we could potentially do as the
Alternates.
alternates, thank you, the alternates.
You can isolate those next innovation estimates. It doesn't have to be actual bids. We're doing the next design development estimate. But we can say, tell us what the cost is for the chimneys. Tell us what the cost is. We can isolate those, so you know, as we're progressing with the design and as the construction market's changing, right? It's spiked a lot. Hearing things that it's leveling off now, it's not escalating as quickly as it was previously. So maybe the year when this goes out to bid, people will turn it, go vacant. At least we've got a plan to be able to tackle the core of the building is programmatically. Those two guys.
May I?
Let me see if I can take a crack at an answer here. Trying to weave together a number of thoughts that are in the air. Tom, I imagine almost every project you work on eventually has to have this conversation. Yeah. I think what the public expects from this committee is to build as much building as possible within the budget. I think as AJ pointed out, we need to include the bones, the infrastructure, the things that can't go back and do later easily. And so my sense is this ad alternate idea, we build as much as we can and then identify the ad alternates. And in the future, as part of the town's ongoing operating budgets every year, which the public votes on, the town will eventually take bites out of this project each and every year. You sometimes hear the term capital improvement program or CIP. Those are the dollars we build into the annual operating budget, which the public gets to vote on. And we make it very transparent and public what we built in for that year. So my sense is we've got some good momentum going here. I think we should continue to build as much building as we can, keeping a firm eye on the fact of we have to include now what cannot easily be retro accomplished later. And so I think some of the early decisions on infrastructure issues and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, as unglamorous as those are, I think we have to make sure we get the bones right. And always add on later. Some segment of the public will be disappointed that the entire building is complete. Yeah, but we're facing extraordinary times right now. And what's important is to get a building open and operating as much as we can, and we will grow into it as a community, both financially and programmatically. So that's my best answer to your question.
And, okay. Then I have the question for
Austin had some.
yeah, Austin, you wanted to speak, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Al, I agree with you 100%. But when we talk about opening a community center, right, everyone has in their mind what that means in town. And, you know, hearing this and understanding what's happening and knowing, you know, we have a set dollar amount that we're trying to get to. I'm envisioning in my head, you know, 2025, we're having a grand opening of the community center. And you guys hand me the keys to the community center to open. And there's no gym, the basement isn't touched. I'm set up for failure from the jump. And in order to get the public's buy-in to let us, not do the bottom floor, or not do the gym, and then delay those things. That's gonna be difficult to do. When, CIP's 5 years, 7, 8 years down the road, it's gonna be hard to program in a space that's not set up for success. And so I think Joan's right, we have to be crystal clear and open and honest with the public what we're doing. So when that day comes and there's no gym, that's not a surprise to people. Because it will be, on me, not the building committee. It'll be looking for me to why can't we have youth basketball in a town facility? We don't have a gym. Why can't we have space to do X, Y, and Z? We had to cut that out. We only had X amount of dollars to do it. It's gonna be hard for people to swallow, because when people came to referendum to vote for a community center, everyone has in their head what that means. And what we're talking about today isn't what that means, but it's money. That's what it is. And it's gonna be hard to swallow for some folks to realize that.
I just want to add to that. Maybe it'll be somewhat controversial, but I do believe Madison Youth and Family Services needs new space. I don't know about Beach and Rec. I don't know their facilities. But again, the referendum was for a community center with some town offices in it. I heard someone say preferential treatment, like those have to be done. I think community center and town offices need to be on equal footing. So when we discussed cutting one versus the other, for what we save money, it needs to be on equal platform. I'm, as a member of the community, I'm listening and I'm getting the sense that this is a town office now with some empty rooms in it. On day one, you hand someone the keys. If that's how it appears to the public, I don't think we've accomplished what we were set out to accomplish.
Can I just chime in? I do think, in a way, for what Joan was saying, getting the public informed about where we are and the reality that you're all faced with, you are essentially picking your own poison for what you want to do publicly.
Yes.
In a way, you can't go to the public and say, we don't, what was envisioned was this thing with a beautiful skylight and an open foyer, and now that's going to clearly be different. I don't know that the public would push back like they did with the school project if we are transparent and saying, look, the financial reality is we cannot create what we envisioned 4 years ago. The public might respond very differently to this if we all approach it in a way that we are clearly saying, this is what we set out to do, here's what's changed. We can have what we initially wanted, but we're going to need more money, and allow the public to weigh in at that point, or whether it's like private groups that maybe want to step up, or somebody who wants to see their name plate on the stage because they sponsored that stage. I'm just, in terms of process, you may want to consider a notion or an idea that we could go to the Board of Selectmen, or we at some point could go to the public to ask for actually more money and not expect the same kind of response that happened. I think anybody who was around a month ago and saw what happened when we had a public hearing about the school facilities, it was very conflictual. I'm afraid of that too. And for somebody who's had to stand up for my programming space, I understand what that's like to face public pushback, criticism. I just don't know that we would get that same response. And you might want to consider the potential of if we've informed the public that there may be an avenue to ask for more funding, and that people may respond positively.
But until we know what we can do with the dollars that are allotted and what it's going to cost to do the rest, we can't go to the public. So that's, and the decisions that, this is the path we're going down. what does everyone think about that? And hear the comments, because in the public hearing, it's just, no one's voting on anything at that point, it's just informational, and it can drive what we're doing as well. I mean, depending on who shows up to the meetings. I mean, we've got a great survey that says these are the types of activities we want to see, and it doesn't mean that those activities can't go on, they just may not be able to go on a pristine stage, or you may have to rent the lighting equipment to bring in order to do a show, in order to do that. Or certain things I think we can kind of go through.
And it's not just, I don't think we could be, I don't think we could look ourselves in the eye if we can say we've done our job until we can answer those questions. And it's, you know, public or not public. I mean, that's our responsibility here. And that's where I'm coming from. This, what is our responsibility? How quickly can we get to our responsibility? To the level where we're happy with that. And
I think it really,
that's why I was asking some of the process questions.
I think it does soften the message to the public, though, if we can go back to them and say, here's the priorities we set. We know we need to address the youth and family services piece of it. We have the list of prioritized needs from the community. And for the amount of money that we have to work with, we focused on those highest value needs that the community identified. I think that really softens the message going back to the community and saying it may not be everything that you originally thought, but it's the most important things you thought.
I'm going to try to synthesize a way to go forward without having heard all this. It's a question maybe for you, Tom. If we decided on some of the majors, the mechanicals, between the two designs, the geothermal or non-geothermal, and asked you to design essentially an empty building or a shell, something a little more than. And we went to the design development phase, and then we added. Then with the money we had left, or a promise or the ability to, or at least the chance that we might get more money, we could fit out the building based now on a much better estimate of what the basics are going to be, what all the mechanicals and walls and abatement is going to be. The work would fall on you. That's why I'm kind of asking you, and maybe Colliers can say if you've ever tried that before. It's just bullshit, judges.
So what you're proposing that we say, what is the bare minimum?
We go through the joint development phase with essentially show me what the, just to fit out the building so it's, a whole space is usable, but without determining what those uses are. And
So we're not creating office space.
we're not creating office space.
We're basically taking the building, new mechanicals, electrical, plumbing, new finishes, new entry.
I think we're going backwards though. I think that's you still need.
Well, but Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, what you are suggesting is that we go in and we table creating a family services suite, table creating a beach rec suite. We just clean up what's there, new entry, elevator, mechanicals, electrical plumbing, and then let's see what it costs.
Right, because then we'll know
And then
what's
everything-
left.
then
Base
everything
building.
is- But,
Yeah,
right,
essentially, yeah.
I mean, there's not,
But
correct me if I'm wrong, this project isn't that different from that already.
Right. There's already been a note as to how much the fit out is for the two areas. We've got that dollar.
Well,
So-
we have a dollar. Dollar figure is defined at the design development stage. So we'll have a better idea of what is left. That's stage, at least from my understanding of the process.
I don't agree. I think we need to have Youth and Family Services and Beach and Rec. Now, whether Beach and Rec wants to say, I don't need 4 offices and a reception area, that's one thing, but I think Youth and Family Services has really, they've actually brought down the number of square footage that they've got in order to be able to do this.
But along the line of Joe's approach, we can draw and design the fit out of that space and just have it priced as an add-on. So you know what that costs above and beyond, up in a box for that space.
But isn't that what the value engineering option did? The 230.
Oh, the estimate?
Yeah.
In theory, yes, theory.
But what I'm hearing is we would end up with, okay, this is what, at the design phase, this is what the have-to-haves are going to cost us. We are left
With a better number than we had.
Right.
But the
with the
have-to-haves
balance.
change. You still have to see if you have these office spaces and the have-to-haves.
I know you're defending
Yeah.
Madison Family Services, but Madison Youth and Family Services is not, it has to be considered as optional. It is a very high priority, but it is an option.
I disagree with that,
Well, Joe,
because it was part of the referendum.
We can
I think Joe is suggesting not that we wouldn't do anything, but rather that we would have better ideas of the costs for the individual components of what the fit out would bring us.
And what the base level of cost it takes to bring the building up to code.
Right.
So,
But your mechanicals are gonna change based on the number of offices, is my point. Your electrical is gonna change based on the number of offices. Your plumbing, everything is gonna change. All the toilet, all of that stuff will change based on the design. So
So the mechanical,
I think in the grand scheme, those are fairly small. Like I'm putting in 10 outlets instead of 5 outlets. It's
well, I mean, we've got,
not huge.
we've got toilets that aren't in the style that they were under the original building. There's, I don't know. I think if we value engineer down to nothing, then it's, I think what we have, I come back to what was in the original estimate. Let's get us what now current costs are of that original estimate so that we can justify it. Then we look at the different areas with the other committee and see what we can cull out. Based
Yeah,
on-
I don't think it's value engineering down to nothing. I think as Joe was saying, it creates just that base building, and it's actually then fair to Mount Youth and Family Services, Beach and Rec, because you can't take the entire cost of their space and say it's up to them, right? That's what it costs to move them there, because there's a base building cost for fit out, for clean renovation, mechanicals, everything just for that space, regardless of what we use it for. Now, if you strip out all that base building cost, the delta is what's really it costs for Madison Youth and Family Services and stuff to move there. So it's fairer to them, and strip it all down to base building. So we know at the very core shell finishes, this is what we need. And then to your point earlier, Joan, then we could start talking about what is the programming cost to put X, Y, and Z in this spot.
The other factor here that we're not talking about, there was additional grant money that this program got, but we can't use it because it has to go to reduce the cost, right?
Correct.
it is
But
the
we
buffer.
could essentially go to the town and say, what you voted on, your cost increase for your taxes is going to be 0 net add, but we need to add money to the project. That's offset by the grants. There's no net new tax
There's,
cost to the community. Why can't we do that?
if you want to try to sell it at a town meeting, go for it, but the way it was written in this.
No, I
doc-
get it, but
No, but I mean,
the way it was written was it's gonna cost me, what, $100 a year for this building. It's still gonna
Less-
cost me $100.
less grants. Less grants.
Less, so
And
there's a
that's-
projection. I voted on a projection, so this is what I'm expecting it to cost me.
Right, but
It's
it also,
still expected to cost me that.
It was written at max.
I would say this is, at this point in time, until we get real numbers. And I don't think you want to try to go down that road because then
Yeah, I mean, that's what
Having-
I'm trying to understand.
the person who's on Facebook listening to the theorists out there, the conspiracy theorists, you know, we're gonna get, this project is gonna be way over budget as well. They're gonna say, oh, you wanna add $4 million to the budget, which is true. You're costing out $4 million more, but you're only paying on the bonding side. People are not seeing that differential at all, at all, at all. They're being ramped up by people who are saying, see, it's gonna cost you more money, the project's costing more money, your taxes are gonna go up. So I think that honestly, from a community approach, you know, if we can get really solid numbers, and if you want to do it where, okay, this is the building and these are the alt ads. But I think the priority of alt ads, the number one priority of alt ads has got to be, you know, youth and family services and beach and rec. Now, beach and rec may come back and go, you know, instead of 4 offices, I can do it 2. And we'll just share some space or whatever. Or Scott, you may come back and go, you know, I got that many offices, let's cut it down. That's something that they can come back to us if they want to, or if they feel as though need. But you've already brought down the square footage, which was presented as part of the package to vote on. Youth and family services is getting less. And there's a lot of folks in this town that utilize that department. The impact. So I don't want to underestimate making that truly an alt ad, because that to me is not, because it was part of, there's going to be programming, there's going to be youth and family services, there's going to, and in order to program, you need the offices there. That was part of what people voted on. There was actually a package that went out to the community with the tax bills.
And Joan,
So-
all I'm trying to do is try to keep the discussion of the priorities within the building out of down now, not try to make those decisions now. And get an idea further down the road, once we get the design development done, of what the building's going to cost and what the assets. And then from there, I think we have a better chance to get public input, and we have a better ability to be sure that we're not promising something we can't keep once a budget, or once an estimate comes in that's higher than maybe what we thought.
Well, I think that the community space was presented as a community building, but also with town offices in it. That was part of the package. That's how,
Right, but how big
That's
they
how-
are, how many they get,
you know, it was in there. The square footage, the estimated square footage for each of the areas was in there. It was part of the package. It was how I think it was approved, because you had buy-in from people
But
that had
the-
been.
But on equal,
But this whole,
people
this-
were looking at
on equal
that.
footing is everything else though.
I think a lot of people were. I think some people didn't. They just voted the way they were told to vote or whatever, but a lot of people did.
what I'm trying to do is take this discussion and move it out to the point where we have a better idea of what the building is going to cost, base building is going to cost, what the items. And not to try to have that discussion at a time when we don't have two things. We don't want to end up with, well, first of all, we don't want to promise something that we can't do. We can't right now make some decisions and then 6 months later say, well, you know, sorry, this space costs more than we thought, so we have to look at that. Even though we went to the town and we asked them, they said, this is what we want. They said, sorry, we can no longer give you that because we've run out of money. I think we have a better chance of better chance of avoiding that by putting it off the discussion, the hardest part of the discussion until some later date when we have a clearer idea of what all the costs are.
Bill, I completely,
Yeah, and Tom, you haven't said anything, Tom. I'm interested in what you have to
I
say.
think John wanted to
John's
say-
been trying
Oh,
to
I'm sorry.
chime in too.
Joe, I'd completely agree with you that if we're going to move forward based on preliminary costs like we have right now, we probably should be looking at what's the cost of the bare bones renovation of the building itself. And then how much is left so we can assess what the gap is between where we ideally would like to go and where we think we can go based on what we have. And that also gives us the information for some later discussion about how do we fill that gap in the future if we want to get back to where we had ideally wanted to go. So
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. You said it better than me. I do. I always like that when somebody helps me out that way.
Technically, I don't think your idea is a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. You design the core, the shell, the improvements, then you would design them under contract. We design the family services space. We design each rec space. The committee can decide, you know, which of the other spaces we design. Maybe we design them all and a bunch of them are at alternates, or they're priced out. But as I mentioned, we're not going to have a better understanding of the dollars until we get to the design development estimate, because there's going to be a lot more detail. Going into the design development phase, that will give me the opportunity to get my arms around engineer and say, we need to take a more cost-effective approach to this, because we need to find some savings, we need a simpler solution. So I don't think your approach is a bad approach, but I do think if you as a committee have an opportunity to identify value engineering items that we don't need or that we should potentially consider removing from the scope of work, now is the time to do it, especially things that would have a significant design impact or design change. I mean, I hate to use this new lobby design as the example, because I like the original design and I think you should do that, but there's no going back. Once I move down the road in one direction, if I have to go back and redesign it, then I have to charge for that. You know, the mechanical systems, right? Are we gonna do a geothermal plant or are we not gonna do a geothermal plant? Because if I design it one way and then we switch, there's more cost to it. So, but things that you can simply sort of remove at this point in time seem to make sense and take sort of a bite out of that gap. Certainly should just say, Tom, I don't think we're gonna do this, right? Let's not consider it. You could always add it in the future, but we shouldn't consider it now. That's it.
So do we want to get a new value engineer options, including the new design for the elevator, and then have that list, have what the estimate was and what it is now, so that we can have the two construction pieces side by side. These are exactly identical, and somebody double check that so that we're talking apples and apples. And then we can all start looking and saying, on the value engineer side at least, and we can say, if you want to, you know, okay, so youth and family services, that's an add-up. If you want to make an add alternate, that's one thing, but, you know, that's gonna, you know, we need to make sure that if you're, I don't see going down to where the building is now and just doing the mechanicals there, because you moved the bathrooms, you did a bunch of different things there and upgrades. Yes, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think we got to start with some level of a design that isn't just how the building sits now and putting mechanicals and updating the mechanics as is.
There's certainly the entrance and the geothermal. But after that, I'm not, is there anything after that that you would need to, you know, is in or out?
Well, there's a whole list.
Some of them remove the replacement of root access.
Good
ladder.
example.
That's something that could be a last one.
Just let me briefly, just really quick. Remove the clerestory light. Yes. Remove the Academy Street facade upgrades. Yes. Potentially remove the geothermal, well, you gotta make a decision about that, that's a big chunk of dollars. Recital hall, no, $6,000 doesn't make any sense. Eliminate your operable partitions, that can be an add-on, big deal.
In the new plan though, it doesn't have the recycle.
I
hall.
know, 'cause that took a
Okay,
while. But
just try, okay.
don't get hung up on the penalties. I know, I'm sorry, I'm teasing you a little bit, you're the finance. Right.
You could get 2 women here.
Remove bleacher seating at the gymnasium. Yes, I can always put that back in at any time. Remove side-to-side basketball backboards. Yes, those can be an add-on. It doesn't, if we can afford them, we can put them in at any time. Eliminate new openings and doors from cafe to activity room. Yes, those don't affect your program any way, shape, or form. Leave and refinish the existing stage in the recital hall. That, I can go either way on that. But you can always finish it, it can always be done at a future date. Remove and fit out the commercial kitchen equipment. Yes, that can go back in at any time.
Because you're stubbing to things.
That's
That
correct.
was the point. You're stubbing and then we can try to raise funds from that.
And that's what makes a perfect example of an act.
Right. That to me is a perfect example of that.
Remove, finish, and fit out in some of the multi-function community spaces. Yes, I can go either way. That's what Joe's actually talking about is he's saying instead of doing it in 2 or 3 spaces, do it in 8 or 9. But for now, I think if you did it in a couple spaces, great. Maybe the focus is on the lower level as opposed to the upper level. Cafe, millwork, kitchen, the beach and rec fit out and youth picnic services fit out. Listen, the reality is, it's my job to identify any potential chances for savings. This is part of the original program. I think it should be part of the building, but I did my diligence to find out what it would cost to locate those offices there. Those could be at alternates. You can identify what the cost impact is. But they really are part of the original building programming. So we should design them no matter what. Remove drywall ceilings in lieu of suspended acoustic tiling, yes. Remove drywall ceilings in lieu of suspended SATC, yes. Those are no brainers. You have a hung ceiling instead of a drywall ceiling.
So I think last time we said on the lowest level, maybe not even have ceilings. Was
Yeah.
that something that we talked about? How much more savings that potentially could be?
Yes, I didn't add that to the list, but I think that's something that should be
Yeah.
considered.
So even though it won't, there may be some fit out, but it won't be as,
That affects
Polished.
the noise though down there.
What?
Would that affect the noise? If you have the room under the gym, if you don't have it,
so we could look at certain things.
would that be, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. It's fine.
And listen, yes, Scott, that's a good point. There's an acoustic impact, but if that's an activity space down there, maybe right now, it's something we can always put back in.
Fair. Leave it there.
I mean, I think Mark made that point pretty well, is anything we put back in later, and Joe even says that, great. Remove the replacement of the roof access ladder, no, that's pennies, that's silly. Remove curtain wall to storefront, yes, that's all day long, we can make that happen. Removal of the penthouse, we're gonna do that anyway. The Plan B redesigns on the list here. And then there's some other, PVC piping instead of cast iron, yes. And then some of these mechanical options really aren't really materialized yet, those aren't completed. So I think most of this list is viable, and on top of that, we draw in a couple of these items that add alternates. And we've gotten to a point where we're like 1.1 or 1.2, and then you make a decision about does it make sense to redesign the entrance or not? I don't know. I don't think the committee has to make those decisions tonight. But I think you should stew on them and maybe make those decisions at the next meeting. And then make a decision at your next meeting whether or not we should proceed into the design development phase and what we should be drawing, what we shouldn't be drawing. And then, and so by then, we'll have a decision about the CMGC, and hopefully we can also start getting second estimator or CMO.
So for the next meeting, then we'd have an updated value engineered options. We have the apples to apples cost buckets. There was some stuff that's on.
Yes, we've done that comparative estimate, but I just have to be very clear about this. The estimates are not apples to apples. The original estimate, we've done a comparative evaluation, and Joe has that, but the original estimates were done at a very high level. There's almost no detail. It's very difficult to put them side by side and get an evaluation. At the next phase of estimating, what we'll have is we'll have this estimate, right? SD estimate. And then we'll have the DD estimate put together by my estimator. And then the DD estimate put together by your estimator. And those will be reconciled, and it'll be very easy to look across and compare them. So yes, I can put them side by side, but they're very difficult. They don't really line.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John, if you were asking about breaking out this detail with the original, right, it was not the screen, not at all.
No, I understand that. There were buckets. And what we're trying to understand is what went into the buckets of the original.
Okay, yeah, so,
If we can have that,
so what we had originally was a certain amount of square footage as new construction, right, at a certain dollar per square foot, and then a level of square footage for a moderate renovation at a certain amount of square foot, and then a light renovation at another. So it was just square foot dollars.
Okay.
Okay, per square foot dollars times square feet of space that conceptually we thought would be a new, which i.e. where that new entry tower was, that was considered new construction. The connecting between the two lower basements, new construction. Youth and family services, heavy renovation.
Right.
And then all the others were considered light renovation. We used a lower cost per square foot for those spaces.
right, but I think we found that some things that were being estimated out were actually not in the construction side. It was something else when we first looked at it. It was in one of the other buckets, so we're furnishing, so those.
Oh, okay, so kitchen equipment was a separate line item. That maybe, that's the only one I can think of. That was a separate line item in our budget, under the FF&E section. And I noticed that was in construction, but yeah, so that's a.
So I just like somebody to just take a quick perusal
Sure.
to make sure that things that were in other buckets aren't in the
Yes,
construction. I get the
got it.
fact that there's no, I don't want stuff that's
Gotcha.
thrown
Yeah,
into
okay.
construction that we're over here.
Okay, that makes sense. No,
If we've set aside budget funding somewhere else.
Else.
for it,
Yeah.
Right.
then
We may need to use that
Yes.
for the construction, so yes, that may all go away, but I just want to be able to speak to that. Because I think that will be a question that will be asked by the public. Period, and just.
There is another bucket, and that's costs external to the building that are they were never in our budget. And what we would recommend that that's a add-on.
Right, I think all.
And that was never in our budget, it was never considered part of this.
should be.
So
in
anything
the
to do with the
Right.
exterior project now, even except for the stairs and the ramp, portico, but even the hardscape, I think you put that as an add-on, add alternate. An alternate. The playground roof, alternate, because we can try to find that.
Sidewalks in general.
Sidewalks and parking lot in general,
Shifting the ball field.
shifting the ball, all of those, right, so all of those, even the parking lot should be probably an alternate in my mind, because we can potentially try to find a way of getting that in through CIP. which is the capital.
We're planning on allow that.
If it timed correctly, so it would have to be inserted. It would have to be timed at the same time that it would be open. So it would be inserted into CIP, which some things do have the need. So it just has to be justified.
Where my brain gets stuck on decisions is that there's some things here that are gonna have a non-changeable ramification to the project. I don't feel like we have enough clarity about how the town feels about them, what the real costs are gonna be. Where, like, how far off we are from the budget, because the stuff you guys just rounded up was 1.2. It's like we're $400,000 short potentially, and like changing the look of the building. Like, there's the potential we could say go with the original design, but then we end up over budget, and now we're kind of stuck. Right? And the same with the geothermal. We could say take it out, and then we've got budget for some reason. Oh, we're way under budget. We really can't put it back in. Like, that's a cost to redesign now, right? So that's where my brain is stuck on some of these decisions where I don't feel like I have the clarity to say.
And I think
Yeah,
that's why
but-
Joe has this idea about so that we can get better numbers and make better informed choices.
But I feel like we have to pick, like, you gotta kind of pick the design of the building to move forward, don't you?
Right. And that's something that's gonna happen in 2 weeks. That's what our next meeting.
Yeah, I'd say it's stew on this a little bit, but we're not making a decision tonight. It's just not. I'm gonna continue to look for potential BE options as we go through this, but it's a lot of information. But there's also the reality that at this point in time, this is the best information I can give you based on the concept design.
Yeah.
And every project and every community faces a little bit of a leap of faith. Projects go forward and they come backwards and they go forward and they come backwards until you get to the final solution. So, if you're, at the end of the day, if your gut tells you, hey, you know what, we should take these value engineering items, these core items, and change the design approach, and just go, then that's the direction we'll go in. If down the road, for some unforeseen reason, you have to backtrack a little bit, maybe that has to happen, but you're still, you'd still be saving dollars. Or you just, maybe you gotta find a savings someplace else. I don't know. I just, at some point, you have to just say, we're gonna move forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Take a decision.
Take the one and leave the other behind.
And
It's not often easy. It's not.
I don't know, maybe sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness. That's my motto.
Not this town. Ask the other building.
If we're going to, if we're going to go this way, I don't think we have to vote. I think this is just, it's a consensus that this is the way to go. We're going to go this way. There's a couple more things in the agenda that has to be.
So what is-
7:30 already.
Okay, that we have to act on. One of them's not going to be easy. Let's see. Okay, so, the first is the update on the phase 2 award bid and review of the contract with Festival Aaron is no longer.
Almost there.
Joe Paradiso had an addition to that. Did Aaron get that, Joe?
I believe she got the email from me. I don't know what happened with it. It was just a recommendation to do groundwater flow direction.
I'll check.
While they have the boring on site.
I'll check with Aaron tomorrow. So we can move past A. We have all read it. Joe's read it, I've read it. And there were no other comments on it. I'll see if Aaron needs. We recommended that the town proceed with Bussin' O'Neill, and we'll go from, we'll see if she needs anything further. I believe 11 we've done. Boy, have we done it. Okay.
Let's go at it again.
No, we've already done that. The select would take to visit the Iverton Theater. I got a date this afternoon, August 29th. It's a Tuesday. We could, based on availability, we can select the time. So you don't have to answer now, but it's a week from today. And they've had some serious problems. It's interesting, just as a, they have had, I'm not sure if it's COVID or laryngitis or strep throat. They've canceled about 5 shows. I think they've canceled 5 shows because.
They canceled it tomorrow.
They canceled, yeah.
I
they
take
did.
it tomorrow night.
Yeah,
Maybe, well, there's another round of COVID.
Yeah.
This is part.
So, but that shouldn't prevent us from going to the theater without an audience. Or any of the cast
Maybe we
members.
want to put a mask on while we go in there too.
So we could, I think it'll be an interesting discussion, especially in the middle of a problem like this. So I will send out a meeting invitation to everybody in the committee. And you can answer yes or no. But it will be, I'm going to give a meeting invitation from like, I don't know, 11 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. And that'll be the extent of the invitation. And you'll have to give me a time. If you're able to go, give me a time. So that, we check that one off. This is maybe the harder one. If we're going to keep to any type of schedule and we're going to delay maybe some decisions tonight on the cost of the costs and the shape of the building and what's in it and what's not. I think we have to move ahead on 13 tonight instead of waiting until our next meeting in September. And I think we have a fairly, from earlier discussions, I think we have there was a consensus. I don't want to say what I think it was on which way we should go. But I'll open the floor for any discussion on it before I say it.
The only question I had, I went back through these options you guys provided. There was one thing that you called out. Was this one or something else? Said there was if you have change orders, the cost was lower typically with a construction manager for change orders. GCs. Wanted to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what it says. The cost is the same. I think, AJ, what it might have been referring is that with a CM.
Effects of change to phasing due to owner requests during construction. CM can mitigate changes better with less cost impact. GC has significant potential.
So I think what the suggestion there is with a CM during pre-construction, during design, if they're able to do design reviews, in addition to our design reviews, the town's internal reviews, you find the things that could become eventually change orders down the road. So those costs, those exposures are less by having another set of professional eyes. When you're in construction,
But is the work then not included in the base contract?
or
All of these items that would be change orders if they had.
right, so if they're not catching,
Right.
it shifted the base. Right, it becomes a change order, if it's not caught corrected, right?
So it's not necessarily that the cost would be less, it's just included in the base contract.
Yeah, yes, but
Costs.
there's a premium, change orders typically are markups. We consider change order to be at a 20% premium. So yes, in theory, you would have paid for it, but not at the premium price. But that, I think, AJ, is what.
Okay.
The thought is that because they're giving once you're in construction, this change order, whether it's unforeseen condition or betterment or whatever, GCCM,
It'll be the same.
exact same process and exact same price, honestly.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Joe, do you have a comment or opinion since you're probably as experienced as anyone in this.
I couldn't make it out all of it. I couldn't hear what everyone was saying.
Do you have an opinion one way or the other, since you have probably the most experience of people sitting in this room right now, except for you guys?
No, I'm saying I couldn't make out the whole conversation. I'm sorry. So I couldn't get what you had, the topic.
The topic is tonight, we can move, if we can move ahead with the GC versus, and make a decision of GC versus construction manager, we can pick up some time in actually putting that in place. Did you get that, Joe?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just don't, I can go either way, frankly. GC, chance to have saved more money. CM gives you more transparency. My gut tells me on this project, GC. But I really don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. Dave might have a stronger opinion.
So I have a question.
So
Oh,
did my volume come through? I'm sorry. I think my
Yeah.
internet's a little messy.
Yes, you came through just fine.
Okay, thank you.
So we're gonna get a second estimator, correct?
Correct.
Is that going to be a cost?
Correct.
Okay, if we get a construction manager, do we need that second estimator?
No, they provide that.
So they provide that service, so that's
Not exactly a wash,
not exactly a wash. How close to the wash?
not even close.
Not even close.
We're
Okay.
talking 6 digits for a CM and $15,000 for an estimate.
Got it. Okay,
Because don't forget, the CM's not just doing estimates, they're sitting in meetings, I'm not minimizing the role that they provide, it's not insignificant, they do provide a role and service. But you're paying for the time, you're paying for contractability, you're paying for a seat at the table essentially. So it's not like they're just talking money, not doing it, they are, they're also doing the estimate, which is big. But being a
From my-
estimate-
From my notes from our prior discussion, the estimate was, and a rough estimate, was about 10% higher cost for a construction manager than a GC. In a budget constrained project like this one is, where we're talking about sacrificing programming space, I think it's a serious chunk of change to have pluses and minuses. And I think we really need to think about it. It was also said that it was probably a good idea for a complex project, but this is not a complex project. And given those factors, to me, it seems pretty strongly to point towards a GC's approach to the project. Just my opinion.
GC.
Agree with that.
Probably.
Yeah, that's what, I missed the meeting where we got the presentation away, but I did, talking to people, I got a very strong GC preference. So I guess we could maybe make a motion to,
We gotta open up the agenda, and we're gonna open up the agenda to have a 13A, because this is just a discussion on schedule. So we're gonna open up an agenda and we're gonna have a vote to select either a construction manager or a general contractor. Do I have a second to open the agenda? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we can have the actual
okay.
motion.
Then I'll make the motion that we use we go the general contracting method, and we charge Colliers with moving ahead to whatever the next steps are.
There's none.
They're done?
Well,
We're talking about getting an outside estimate.
Okay, so getting the outside estimate.
No, all we're talking about is the GC versus CM. So if you're deciding to go GC, there's nothing we have to do. Because when you're ready to go to bid, we'll just put the bid like any other
Okay.
bid documents in a month and a year.
So,
Nothing to do.
okay, then the motion simply is that we have chosen general contractor method for getting, for completing the project.
Second. There we go.
Any further discussion? In favor?
I,
Now, do we now authorize the,
You don't do any of us here at this point.
okay, then that's it.
Down
Okay. Any other comments on this, on 13 or 13A?
Thought that was gonna be as contentious.
I didn't thought about that weeks ago. I just didn't know if I, what I had heard was right. Last item on the agenda would be public comments. Jeannie, anybody there? Anyone here being public would like to make a comment? No? I see none. Okay, move we adjourn.
that's good.